What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Are the D-backs making a move for Japanese pitching phenom Roki Sasaki?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and graphic designer. So please go check out my website, MillardThomas24, downmyportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit fanduel.com to get started. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, I want to discuss the D-backs reported interest in Japanese pitching phenom Roki, I think it's pronounced, Sasaki. I want to do a part two of what we did last week. What went right? We did position players that start for the D-backs. I want to do what went right. One sentence blurbs for the bench players for the D-backs this past season. And then, of course, another player review to end the podcast. And today we are going to break down Adrien Del Castillo's 2024 season. So thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right. Let's get back to the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast and let's discuss the D-backs reported interest in Japanese phenom Roki Sasaki because D-backs are sending some executives to go watch Sasaki, and this is someone that I would be super interested in the D-backs signing this offseason. This guy might be number one on my list of potential free agents for the D-backs. I think, of course, number one objective is re-signing Christian Walker. And then outside of that, like it's like if you could re-sign one or both of the DHs, pick up the Eugenio Suarez option, get it one reliever, two relievers. Like the D-backs really don't have to do much outside of just bring back like the team that you already had this season. Maybe go upgrade your bullpen a little bit. Maybe make an adjustment in your rotation. Like it's fine if you just believe in the bounce back of your rotation with a new pitching coach. Like for the D-backs, really, they don't have to do anything wild this offseason to really shake it up. If they honestly just bring back this team next season, like again, this was an 89 win team that led the league in scoring. Like it was their pitching that was the problem. And again, I think when you looked at the pitching, you would say injuries to the rotation and just a weird season by a lot of the guys. I think you would hopefully expect a bounce back for a lot of the rotation next year. And you get a reliever in the bullpen, all of a sudden you're like, this Z-backs team is going to be fine next season. But if the D-backs want to do something a little wild and a little crazy and want to get someone that could really move the needle this offseason, someone that would be a major splash and really, I think, just up the level of ceiling for the D-backs, not only next season as a World Series contender, but talk about building a sustainable winner for the next few years, being able to match up against the teams like the Dodgers and the Padres and the Phillies. Getting a guy like Roki Sasaki could do just that for the D-backs because this is a guy who will be turning 23 years old. He is super young, has dominated Japanese baseball the last few years. 2.35 ERA this past year, 1.78 the year before, a 2.02 ERA the year before that. This guy has dominated Japanese pitching. He looked great on the WBC stage. Like he's put together some insane outings. He's had like a 19 strikeout perfect game before, and he's followed that up with like a consecutive start where he went like another 8 perfect innings. Like this guy's insane. triple digit heater, like a nasty splitter. Like when you're talking about Japanese pitching prospects and dudes coming out of that country, this is one of the best. He's arguably the best pitcher in Japan right now, and he's in his early 20s. This is someone where if the D-backs can get him, I think could really change life for the D-backs next season and moving forward. Because if you have a rotation with Gallen, Fott, Kelly, and Sasaki as your top four, I don't care about Erod. I don't care about Monty then in that situation. That is a locked in top four for at least 2025. And then moving forward, right? We talked about Zach Gallen being a pending free agent after the 2025 season. Same with Merrill Kelly. Technically, we don't know about Jordan Montgomery's future with the D backs. Like all of a sudden, after next year, the rotation could get pretty thin or it could get pretty expensive. And so having a guy like Sasaki in the building could do so much for this D backs future. Now, the only problem is because he's so talented, there's going to be a lot of other teams interested. The Red Sox are going, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, like every big market team is in on Sasaki. They are all interested in him because he is that good of a pitcher that he could really change life in the rotation. So that's problem number one. The market for him is going to be robust. Problem number two, the odds of him actually being a free agent this offseason, I don't know how likely it's going to be. It might be 50-50 or less. The issue is when it comes to like the Japanese clubs and like posting other players, there's really not an incentive for the club to do it outside of their player just wanting to come to Major League Baseball. Like for the ball club to do it right now, it doesn't make any sense for them. For the ball club, if they wait till he's like 25 years old, then there's like no max on like how much the club can like receive back from like a posting fee when they send him out there. But if they do it right now, essentially major league ball clubs can only sign him as like a minor league player, which like limits how much the team can like profit off of him coming to Major League Baseball. And so it would make no sense for the team to post him right now outside of just doing him a good service and doing something out of good faith, which maybe reflects, nicely on the organization for other star players. Because, like, the best analogy you can make, it would be like if Corbin Carroll was still Corbin Carroll, right? Still had that phenomenal rookie season, still was maybe one of the star players of the future, like he is right now with the D backs. But he was on his rookie contract, going through arbitration. And then just every season, he was like, hey, can I go be a free agent? Can I go be a free agent? And the D-backs would be like, no, why would we let you test free agency? You're making like less than $1 million and you're one of the best players in baseball. It makes no sense for us to do that. And that's basically what Sasaki's asking of his ball club. Hey, can you post me so I can go to free agency and maybe go sign with, the Yankees or the Dodgers? Meanwhile, you get nothing in return. The ball club is like, if we wait 2 years, we can maybe make like $100 million off of you. And so it really makes no sense for his ball club to do it right now. That is like the only reason why it is probably going to be so hard for the D-backs to get him. Not just the fact that all the other big markets are also in on Sasaki. It's also the fact that his ball club probably isn't going to post him right now because it doesn't really make a lot of sense for them to do that. But in the case, in the scenario where Sasaki is posted and he is a free agent this offseason and he hits the open market, I believe the D-backs should do everything in their power to go get him, because you look at the wave of pitchers that have come out of Japan over the last decade: Kodai Senga, Shoto Imanga, Yu Darvish, Masahiro Tanaka, Shohei Otani, Yamamoto, Kuroda, like literally every guy who are like, oh, that's one of the best pitchers in Japan. Every time one of those guys come over, they dominate Major League Baseball. They're one of the best pitchers in the sport. And so if Sasaki becomes available, D-backs need to do everything in their power to hopefully acquire him. Now I want to discuss one thing each D-backs position bench player did right this past season in segment number 2. But hey, if you want to place a little wager down on the D-backs next season to win the World Series, because never too late to do, or too early, I guess, to do a futures bet. And the best place to do that, of course, is going to be FanDuel, because get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place the live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play by play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Give me the Saints money line, give me Rattler over on total yards, and give me Kamara over on rushing yards. When that three leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. And if you want a big smile on your face, just visit fanduel.com to get started today. You'll get started with $150 of bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast and let's do a little game of what went right. Quick one sentence blurb describing each of these bench player seasons with the D-backs. We did part one last week on the podcast discussing the starters among the position players, but now I want to discuss the bench players now for Arizona. The first guy I want to discuss is Kevin Newman. And the one thing that I thought he did phenomenally in 2024, stepping up in the early part of the season when Blaze Alexander was going through those defensive struggles. Because to begin the year, Blaze was out there, he was on fire, but then his defense started to struggle. It started to affect his offense. And with Geraldo Perdomo out, it was like this D-backs shortstop position was seemingly cratering and falling apart before our very face. But Kevin Newman came in and immediately stepped up to the plate. He honestly played really well, had a pretty high average for like most of those early months, and he even finished with a 278 average overall. So Kevin Newman and his ability to step up with the shortstop position down bad with the Blaze Alexander defensive struggles and the Geraldo Perdomo injury, we were very grateful for Kevin Newman's presence this season. Blaze Alexander, the thing that he did really well this season, he crushed left-handed pitching, and that's why he started off the season so hot because Blaze Alexander, lefty killer this past year, 297 average, 819 OPS, and that's at least something going forward that you can build off of. If he can get his defense to just a fundamentally sound area, maybe it could be a platoon situation guy with the Geraldo Perdomo, right? Come off the bench and fill in the Kevin Newman spot that because Kevin Newman's going to be a free agent, Blaze could fill in that spot and just be a platoon to Kevin or be a platoon to Geraldo Perdomo. Obviously, Perdomo is a switch hitter, but the days you want to give him a little rest with a lefty on the mound, you put in Blaze Alexander, and hopefully his defense is at least solid at that point where he can start games for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Next up, if you're watching this on YouTube, I just have like the weirdest glare on like my green screen right now, just really annoying me, but it's fine. We're just going to work through it here. Next up, I want to talk about Josh Bell because the one thing that I thought he did really well for the D-backs this past season was stepping up immediately when Christian Walker went down with injury. D-backs went out there, acquired Josh Bell at the deadline. And I thought his immediate impact those first couple weeks was the greatest thing that he could have done for Arizona because that first game against Pittsburgh, his debut game, 2 home runs with the D-backs. And then just a few days later, August 2nd was his debut. On August 7th, a doubleheader, the second game of the doubleheader, another 2 home run game for Josh Bell. I thought he came in immediately, just kept the vibes going, kept the offense going. Of course, with a guy like Christian Walker gone, you were nervous about the power, right? Were we still going to have that masher as your cleanup hitter? Because we know Torey Lovullo wants to put your first baseman as your number 4 hitter. I didn't know if Josh Bell was going to be able to keep up the production of a Christian Walker. And thankfully, he came in and immediately did not skip a beat. Defense was solid. Offense was better than maybe what we expected. I like Josh Bell this past season. He's a pending free agent. I would be fine to bring him back as a bench backup to Christian Walker, DH platoon guy. But as an everyday first baseman, I think I would be out on that scenario. But I was positively impressed with Josh Bell this past season in the small sample size he had. Pavin Smith, the thing that he did really well for the D-backs this past year, He finally showed off some power. 547 slugging for Pavin Smith is not something you would have ever expected to say. A 547 slugging for Pavin Smith, just for some context, Ketel Marte had a 560 slugging. Eugenio, 469 slugging. Christian Walker, 468 slugging. Jock Peterson, 515 slugging. Pavin Smith, 547 slug. Like, by the numbers, obviously, small sample size of only 60 games, but second highest slug on the D-backs. Insane to say out loud. Pavin Smith, 9 home runs in those 60 games to go with 11 doubles. Like, I don't know where the power came from. I don't know if it's sustainable. I don't know if it's true, but you got to call it out because this is someone that power was always the arguably the weakest part of his game, especially being a first baseman. You were like, this guy can't hit more than 7 home runs. And with the way he displayed this season, you're like, oh, if he played 162 games, he might have hit like 30 home runs. So we need to know if what we saw from Pavin Smith this past season is true or not. Jose Herrera, the thing that he did really well this past year, he was a guy that thrived at Chase Field. When looking at the splits for Jose Herrera, 291 average when hitting at home. Was he a good road player? No, but at least he hit in front of his home crowd. We'll take that. For Alec Thomas, the thing that he did really well this past year, this guy is still clutch. Runners in scoring position, 581 slug and an 884 OPS. He was still at his best with runners in scoring position. And that seems to be like the rub on Alec Thomas. Like, he's not a good player day in, day out, but if you put him in like a big high leverage moment, he does seem to have a little bit of a clutch factor with him. And once again, this past season, if you put runners on Alec Thomas at the plate, you can actually trust him in that moment. And then finally, Adrian Del Castillo, just like a Josh Bell, the thing that I want to discuss with him, the way he immediately set the world on fire when he also was called up with Gabriel Moreno on the mend. The D-backs were going to need some offensive spark with Marte out, Christian Walker out. The D-backs were dealing with a lot of injuries. We needed some offensive weapons. Adrian Del Castillo hit in the first game, debuted 1 for 3 with a double, RBI, really good start his first game. And then after that, immediately takes off. Back to back 3 hit games. He has a 6 RBI game not that long after that. Like, he just has an insane month. He was just on fire the whole time with the D-backs. And offensively, really good. There are some things he needs to work on, which we'll discuss in segment number 3. But for Adrian Del Castillo, the one thing, the one blurb that I will say about him that was really positive from 2024, he immediately set the world on fire when he got called up, and he was not lacking any confidence. Now we'll actually discuss Adrian Del Castillo in more detail as we'll do his play review in segment number 3. But hey, if you like daily fantasy sports, then I suggest playing Prize Picks because Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less and at least 2 player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your games all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app, Prize Picks, code LOCKEDONMLB, $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast and let's discuss Adrian Del Castillo and the 2024 season he just had because he was a bright spot with what he was able to do, stepping up with Gabriel Moreno out and a bunch of guys out in the lineup. Adrian Del Castillo, you would have not known he was a rookie because he immediately came in, tore the cover off the ball, and really helped keep this D-backs offense afloat. And honestly did more than keep it afloat because he crushed it. And in the minor leagues, he had himself a phenomenal year in AAA. I mean, this is a guy, you look at his numbers the last couple years in the minor leagues, and he has really crushed it. But this past season, it was honestly insane. I mean, 105 games in AAA, 26 bombs, 312 average, and 1,000 OPS. And on the major league level, didn't slow him down either. 313 average, 893 OPS in just 25 games, 4 home runs, 19 ribbies. This is someone who offensively I think is legit. I think he's got a bat. I think he's got that tool. The question is his long-term output just backup offensive catcher? Maybe he could DH a little bit for you, but he can't be an everyday guy. Like, is that his long-term output, or can he improve his defense to actually be a starting catcher for a team? And maybe because of that, he could be a really interesting trade piece. Because when you look at the strengths from Adrian Del Castillo this past season, it's clearly all offense. What he did against the fastball this year, he absolutely crushed fastballs this year for the Dbacks. 320 average and a 560 slugging. Also did it against the off speed. 455 average and a 540 slugging against off speed pitches as well. You just go up and down Adrian Del Castillo's splits, and it's like there really wasn't any area that he wasn't really strong against this past year. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you see my face starting to fade away because the sun is starting to set here. I was using natural light for my studio, and now that's getting a little bit darker, my face is starting to fade away as the podcast is starting to wrap up here. But we're going to power through on the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Del Castillo, go up and down his splits on his baseball reference page. I mean, he really crushed in every sort of scenario. I mean, he did better against the lefties, despite being a lefty hitter. The numbers against lefties was pretty strong for Del Castillo. Again, not a huge sample size, but he was 8 for 18 against lefties. And against righties, still very good as well. 17 for 62, which is a 274 average. And he had an 864 OPS against righties. Like, you love to see that. Runners in scoring position, a 1218 OPS. He was 10 for 26 with the runners in scoring position. Like, any kind of scenario really didn't matter. High leverage moments, 7 for 19, a 1297 OPS. Like, this was a guy who was clutch. Remember him late game scenarios, right? There was definitely a couple moments he had in the ninth inning where he had a monster hit. This guy was absolutely clutch. And it's like, you're a rookie. How do we have so much trust in you already? How do we have so much confidence in you already? Well, part of it's because Adrian Del Castillo has so much confidence in himself. That was probably the number one thing about him when you were watching Adrian Del Castillo. This man was never lacking any confidence, and you love that as a youngster. You don't want to see someone get called up in the middle of a playoff race and look scared out there, look nervous out there, right? Adrian Del Castillo did not look that. He looked ready for the moment, big game situations. He's like, put me at the plate. And honestly, whenever it was like, oh my God, the D-backs are down 1 run entering the ninth inning, but Adrian Del Castillo's like fourth or fifth up in the lineup. If we can just get to Adrian Del Castillo, the D-backs are going to have a chance to win this game. And Adrian Del Castillo delivered some game winners for the D-backs this season. Excuse me. But there were a couple things that he does need to work on, because despite his offense being so good, he's a one-way player, because the other side of Adrian Del Castillo, his defense, that was not good at all this past year. How many times did we see runners just take off against Adrian Del Castillo, right? As soon as Moreno went down, D-backs were setting records for how often teams are running against them and stealing bases against the D-backs. A big part of that was because ADC was just terrible defensively behind the plate, catching runners, pop time. His framing even wasn't that good. Like, as an overall defensive catcher, Del Castillo has to get so much better. We love him offensively. We think the bat is there. The bat, honestly, it's he still struck out a ton this past season. Over 30% strikeout rate. That was too high. The hard contact stats too need to be a little bit better. Honestly, he didn't even create that much overall contact. So you might even think like his numbers this past season were a little bit fluky, but when you have the season you had in AAA, and then the slash line continues to be the same on the major league level, I think the sample size is large enough for me to say Adrian Del Castillo is a good offensive player. The question is his defense. Just like a Blaze Alexander, your defense has to at least get to a place where it's fundamentally sound and at least league average, because right now both of those guys were below league average defensive players at their positions. And as good as their offense was for the D-backs at times and delivered wins for the D-backs at times this season, their defense also delivered losses at times this past year. And so for Blaze Alexander, for Adrian Del Castillo, for both of them, they need to improve their defense this offseason. Now, before fade away on this podcast, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news, coverage, and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Dose.